Hey, third grade, it's Mrs. Crosswhite. We're going to get started with a collaged landscape. So we're going to talk about what you need first. And remember, anytime you can hit pause real quick to grab what you need. You need different color pieces of paper. If you don't have construction paper, you can use anything from magazines, takeout menus, any paper that your parents say is fine to use. You need a pair of scissors. You need either a glue bottle or a glue stick. And we're going to get started. So we're building a landscape. A landscape, if you looked through the PowerPoint presentation, is a view of something outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take this purple piece of paper first. You don't need to use purple. This just needs to be the color I want for my sky. So purple would mean that this would be a nighttime scene. And then I'm going to take the color I need for my background. So for me, I want my background to be hills. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this green paper and I'm going to go ahead and cut out some hills from the top. I'm going to lay that on top of my sky. And if it's too far, I can always make it a little bit shorter too. So, just so we remember, here is our sky. And this first layer of paper is actually our background. In a landscape, there's a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. So this is the background that I just made with my green. Now I'm going to go to a different color, this different green right here, and I'm actually going to build my middle ground. Now, since we are kind of all stuck at home and you're using different supplies and materials, make sure you save some of your scraps because you never know if you might need them for something else. So now what we've just made is our middle ground. So I have my sky, which is a nighttime sky because of the purple, my background, and here is my middle ground. Now, always remember, when it comes to a landscape, the sky is not ground. So never call your sky part of your background because that's not what it is. Now, for my last part, I'm going to make foreground. So the part that's in the front. And I'm actually going to use blue, and I'll tell you why I'm going to use blue. I actually want my foreground to be a river. So I'm thinking about different environments. So for mine's going to be a forest. If you've got lots of yellow paper, you can make a desert. If you've got like yellows and oranges, that would work too. You can make mountains, anything at all. So the last part of my landscape is my foreground. So let's talk about these pieces for a second. When we make a landscape, so a view of something outside, and this is true for a painting or a collage like we're doing, there's three big pieces: the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. When things are in the foreground, they're close to you. They're going to be much bigger. As things get further away, they get smaller. Now we're going to talk about some details, for example. So whatever paper you have available is what you can use. Don't think you can't use what's around you. We can use almost anything in this scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to cut out a couple triangles to make some trees. Now I'm going to put this tree in my middle ground. My middle ground is closer to me, so that tree is going to be bigger. But let's say I want to make another tree and put it in the background. If that's the case, that tree should be smaller because it's further away. Now, I'm kind of limited on my supplies also. So for things like tree trunks and things like that, I'm actually going to have to use some yellow paper. We're just like you guys. Sometimes we just don't have exactly what we need, and that is perfectly okay for this, guys. We really just want to focus on making sure, and that's too big, that we have the skills we need when we go to 4th grade next year. So there's an example of what you can do as far as details. So whatever's here in the front needs to be bigger than what's in the back. Now, I'm going to go ahead and have some fun with this too. Since mine's a nighttime sky, I'm going to go ahead and cut out a moon to go in my sky. So when you do this, you might want to look at some pictures of landscapes. So you can think of forests, mountains, anything at all. Now, let's say you don't have paper. Let's say you don't have any of this construction paper or colored paper, anything you can really use. You can actually do this on a blank piece of paper and draw it instead. So you can actually draw the lines for each one of these sections. So background, middle ground, foreground. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start attaching these. So, like I said, you can use any glue, really. You can use liquid glue, you can use a glue stick. It's up to you, whatever you have. I'm going to go ahead and use a glue stick. And you always glue your background first. So I'm going to take my glue stick. I'm going to apply some glue. Just enough to get it to stick. I'm going to apply the background first. The background always goes first. Then I'm going to do my middle ground. My middle ground will be next. Kind of think of it like layers to a cake, one on top of the other. And then my foreground, which is actually my river, can be at the very bottom. And I'm actually going to use that to cover up these uneven edges. And remember, if you're using a glue stick, you don't need too much. And if you're using a glue bottle, remember, dots, not puddles. We don't want puddles of glue. And then here is the basics for my landscape. My sky, my background, my middle ground, and of course, my foreground. So we'll talk about the details again. So for example, the trees I've added, larger things are going to go in the front. Whereas smaller objects or parts to my landscape, so trees, bushes, even animals, those go in the back. So always remember, as things come forward, they get bigger. As things get further away, they get smaller. And this is called the illusion of depth. So it shows space on a flat surface. That's how people make things look more three-dimensional, is by using those methods. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up and start adding some more details. Now, for some of you who don't have paper at home, or if you don't have a glue stick or you can't find the scissors, you can do this drawn on a piece of paper. So what I'm actually going to do is, for this last part, if you're good with the paper part and you want to continue by cutting and gluing, go for it. But if you're reaching this point and you're saying, I don't have those things, you can keep watching. So what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to flip this over, and we can actually do a drawing of a landscape as opposed to a collage. So what you can do is, we still need these things. We need a sky, a background, middle ground, and foreground. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to use the same idea I had before, where I have hills, and my middle ground, and then my foreground is actually the water. So really all I've done is drawn 3 lines. Here's my sky, my background, which is my hills, my middle ground, and my foreground, which is my water. And what I can do is, I can use those same skills with pencil, marker, crayon, whatever I have. So I can add waves to my water to show the details of the water. And again, you don't have to do hills. You could do a desert, you could do mountains, anything at all. So here's my water. And then I can start adding the details such as trees. And I'm going to remember that as things get closer, they get bigger. So if I put a tree further away, that tree is going to be smaller because it's further back in my middle ground. And then I can add details to my landscape such as the moon, because I still have my purple paper, of course. Things like stars in my sky. You could even think about weather that happens at this time. So adding details like clouds and rain, even snow. Completely up to you. And then you can think about things like animals. I could add details to the front by adding rocks to my water. If I have rocks sticking out of the water. Anything at all. So today when you make your landscape, just remember, background, middle ground, and foreground. And keeping things big in the front and small in the back. Use what you have. Either way is fun. And I'd love to see some pictures if your parents could share them with me. I hope you're all doing well. Bye, guys. I'll see you next week.